Nice little cup of tea there. Right, it's now time for difficult conversations, because once the NHS was the envy of the world, and many would say that our NHS is no longer fit for purpose. Waiting lists are at an all-time high, with more than 7 million people in England waiting to start routine hospital treatment at the end of February. And the long waits lead to despair as people suffer in pain with health problems. But for private care, out of reach for many due to the hefty price tag, UK residents are increasingly heading abroad to countries like Lithuania to have their ailments treated. However, despite the NHS offering full reimbursements to these sort of operations where people do this, some people still haven't been paid yet. So for my difficult conversation, I'm going to speak to 3 people who have had things done and have not been paid. Let's have a chat. I'm joined by Stephen Williams, Don Thomas and Marina Stock. Thank you so much for joining me. OK, so I'm going to start with Stephen. Stephen, thank you very much. Stephen, talk to me about what happened to you. I mean, obviously, don't go into too much detail. We don't want graphic detail, Stephen. But just tell us what happened to you. What were you promised and what happened in the end? What was it like going abroad?
Well, it was I was very nervous at the beginning to travel out. It was sometimes difficult for me to make the decision. But once I was there and I was in the clinic, what I could see, it was second to none treatment. I was treated, what can I say, basically like a god. That's the only way I can explain it.
Wow, that's good. Where did you go, Stephen? Where did you go? And can you say what it was that you got treated for? Because there might be others listening.
Yeah, I got treated for a full left hip replacement at Clinica in Lithuania, Kaunas, Lithuania. And it was, the clinic was absolutely spotless. The people there, the whole staff of Clinica were absolutely outstanding from the beginning to end. I spent 3 nights there. My treatment, I originally went in at 7:30 in the morning. I had the operation at 9:30. I was back in my bed at 11 o'clock, and the treatment from there on by the whole staff, the auxiliary staff, the nurses, the surgeon himself was absolutely outstanding, the anaesthetist, they were all brilliant. I would recommend anybody to go to Lithuania and have their operation.
But you look too young for a hip replacement, really? The whole thing. And afterwards, were you able to how long did it take you to get recovered after that?
Well, I'm used to doing a lot of exercise, and I'm used to doing a lot of long distance walking. And I was back on the mountain within 6 weeks.
No, wow. And so how much did it cost you then? Because you were promised that you'd be reimbursed. How much did it cost you?
It cost for the operation and the implant. It came to £5,500.
Wow.
I inquired over here how much it cost over here. Although they tell you there's a standard rate of £12,500, but once they add everything on, it probably goes up to about £16,500. Of course, we had to pay our own expenses, which then took with the flights, the hotel for my wife and myself, and a 10-day rehabilitation centre afterwards where they look after you perfectly. It come to just under £7,000. So it was well under half the price of what we'd pay over here.
So all in, if you had all that in, everything, £7,500. Wow, that's great.
Yeah, under £7,000 my hours came to.
That's incredible. Don Thomas, talk to me about what happened to you and where you went.
Yeah, similar to Steve, I had a full hip replacement, my left hip. My hip was degrading very quickly indeed. It went within about 6 months. And because I had polio in my right leg when I was a youth, my left leg had sort of done a lifetime's work. So that's why it was going very quickly. And I was concerned that if my left hip went, then effectively I would be totally immobile. I wouldn't be able to walk at all. Prior to the operation, I was walking on a walking stick.
And so where did you go? And are you able to cast aside the walking stick now?
Yeah, or walking absolutely normally now. I'm not quite like Steve, because they say that if you couldn't run a marathon before, you won't be able to run one afterwards. But no, it's all working very well indeed. And I went to fight there as well.
You went to the same place? And how much did it cost you?
About £7,000, including sort of travel and my wife's accommodation as well. And that includes the basically 2 weeks altogether, 3 nights in the clinic, and then transferred to a 5-star health spa, effectively, for rehabilitation for 10 days afterwards.
Okay.
I've got to say that the Clinica were excellent in the service that they gave, because they when you make the booking, they allocate you a representative, a service representative, and they do all you book your own flight, but everything else is arranged and booked by them. So there's somebody to meet you at the airport.
Oh, that's interesting.
Taxi
Interesting.
to take to the clinic, and then they arrange the transfer from the clinic to the health spa and back to the airport at the end of it all.
Oh, sounds good. Marina.
Clinical questions. If you've got a question, if you email it within an hour, you've always got an answer, and there's no hesitation in really how small the question can be. Really,
That's interesting, because you do that here, nobody will get back to you. You'd be dead by the time they do. Marina, what about you? What happened to you? Where did you go?
Very similar to Don and Steve. In fact, I actually corresponded with Steve's wife online and heard about Free Clinica from her. And the thought of actually applying for S2 funding was quite an important part of my applying. And the clinic actually provided a lot of the documentation that I any that I needed. Jumped through all the hoops for the S2 funding, and it was rejected. So I didn't actually get... My health board rejected it. They said their interpretation of the rules was that, no, it wouldn't apply. By that time, I was in so much pain. I'd booked it anyway. I was going. I'd been waiting 9 months, and I still hadn't had my first appointment with the surgeon.
Wow.
And I was classed as urgent for both
So the funding, so you were all promised that you would get your money back then, apart from you, Maria?
A lot of forms, and you apply for S2 funding, and they're supposed to give you a certificate, and that will then go to the clinic, and basically you get the cost, as Steve said, of the implant and the operation. Everything else, you can't expect the NHS to pay for your airfare or your insurance.
No. Well, no, that's a bit...
But, so fair enough. But that's the difference between whether you can afford to do that privately or not.
Yeah, well, listen, thank you very much.
I couldn't afford to go private in the UK, here in Wales.
Well, Marina, we're running out of time because we've got to get over to the Grand National. Apparently there's been a major incident. Marina Stott, thank you very much. Don Williams and Stephen Williams. Now, the Department of Health and Social Care sent us this statement. The NHS is working hard to cut waiting lists, and we're continuing to make progress on our elective recovery plan, despite winter pressures on the NHS and industrial action. The longest waits for treatment have fallen for the 3rd month in a row, and there were a record 2.1 million diagnostic tests carried out in January, thanks to our 100 community diagnostic centres, which have delivered over 3.4 million tests, checks and scans. Our urgent and emergency care recovery plan will deliver one of the fastest and longest sustained improvements in emergency waiting times.